Long story short, so before we jump on to the next episode, I just want to share something really interesting with you, okay? About 93% of you who listen to Long Story Short are not yet subscribed. So, big favor. If any of these episodes have encouraged you, if they have resonated with you, if they have reminded you that you are not alone, subscribe. It's completely free and it really helps other people find these stories.
Hi, my name is MaryAnn Ferreux, and this is my long story short. I don't talk about my kind of early start very often. I lived this really strange life of two lives. One, which was my home reality, where we didn't have a lot, and then in this other world of immense privilege and wealth, where I didn't feel like I kind of fitted into either. And then added on top of that, my ethnicity. I also didn't feel like I fit into the Black culture or into the white culture. So I kind of constantly lived with this dichotomy of never quite fitting in. Anyone that's kind of thinking about doing something a bit off the wall, I guess I'd say trust your gut. You're probably right.
Yeah, before I even get started, thank you so much because you're chief medical officer, with a busy schedule. So I
That's
really
okay. This is
appreciate your
important.
time.
That's fine. This is important. I think I try to do this as much as possible because I think that, not there aren't enough people that kind of really share the journey, are there? That kind of go into the nitty-gritty of you kind of just see this perfect picture on LinkedIn and don't realize there's a whole story behind that. Yeah.
Mm,
So I
mm.
love these opportunities. So thank you for having me. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
wonderful. Are you ready like Freddie, as they would
Yeah,
say?
sure, sure.
Excellent. Um, so if you see me looking down or looking at my notes, I'm not ignoring you. It's just that I need this. Yeah, this is menopause brain going
I've
right
got the
here.
same thing. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm telling you, menopause brain. But I just want
Yeah.
to thank you and welcome you, Marianne, Dr. Marianne. Yeah,
Yeah, that's all right.
yeah, the title that you've worked so hard for to the Long Story Short podcast. The Long Story Short podcast is about hearing stories about resilience, from everyday people sharing how they have navigated life's twists and turns. And I just want to say thank you to my good friend Donna, okay, who made the link, because she was
Yeah,
listening to, what was it, the fireside chat by Black women on
yeah,
NHS
yeah.
boards. And she was like, Soph, you've got to listen to this woman. You've got to invite her onto your podcast. And so
Mm.
she sent me the link via LinkedIn. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, quick text message, and here you are. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's lovely to hear that. So, and for your warm welcome. Really
Yeah.
nice.
So as we like kick off the whole your episode on Long Story Short, I always like to start off with a question about, the early starts, the beginnings. So the first question is about who you are. When nobody's looking, no
Mhm.
titles, no awards because you've got awards. Yeah. Without all of that, who is Dr. Marianne?
Who am I? I'd say first and foremost, I'm a mum. So, I've got three boys. I think they are my greatest achievement. I can't believe I made three human beings. And they're my pride and joy. And I've been incredibly blessed to have a family and they really ground me in why I do the work that I do and what I want to leave behind. And that's why I talk about legacy so much. It's for them. What is the world that I want to leave them? And also, what are the kind of behaviors that I want to role model for them? I think it's really hard to be boys, to have good influences and in terms of, growing up to be a man. And I'm lucky my husband's amazing with my three boys, but I just think it's just kind of such a polarizing and divisive world at the moment that we live in. And I really want them to learn kind of lessons around justice and equity and standing up for unfairness and the importance of being kind to other people.
I love that justice, equity, and the importance of being kind to people. I always say that I treat others how I treat myself. Do you get what I mean? So I would love that back. And you're
Yeah.
right, we are living in such a divisive world at this present time. So where are those values from? Like if I think about my childhood growing up, my mum used to run a market stall in Hackney on the Waste every Saturday. Yeah, and I had to obviously help her. I had no I had no, do you know what I mean? No, Sophie, you can't. You have to stay in your bed. I had to go and help her every Saturday. And my values, what my mum taught me about the values of hard work, studying, and also the importance of money, finance. She really taught me lots of lessons in that. So, if we was to think about your childhood experience, how has that shaped your view of success today?
Yeah, so I don't talk about my kind of early start very often, and some of it's because it was really hard. Um, I faced a lot of challenges. So I'm mixed race, and my mum's white, my dad's Nigerian. Um, my mum was a single mum. We lived on a council in a council flat in central London in Holborn, and things were really tough, really, really bad at some points, facing housing insecurity, and just the challenges of trying to live in London and, during the 80s, and my mum not having a very big support system. So she was originally from Worcestershire and had moved to London for work. And, challenges with family and things like that. And so I think, that I think about those times more and more now. I kind of tried to ignore them for quite a long time, but it did have a huge influence on me. I actually ended up living with my grandparents so things got pretty bad, and so I moved um, to Worcestershire, where my grandparents were when I was about 6 or 7, and left my mum and ended up moving from this kind of inner city, vibrant, diverse, population life to rural countryside, where I was literally the only brown person in like a 20-mile radius. Um, and that was really challenging, to be different, be seen as different. Not many people like live with their grandparents, and people wanting to know why. And then you look different, you sound different. I was very tall, so you can't see me on the screen, but I'm actually 6 foot tall, so I'm also extremely tall. So kind of all of these things I found really challenging. But I think that there were some really strong lessons in there. So my mum was a teacher. She worked really hard. The reason I went to live with my grandparents was really so that she could kind of maximize her career to provide that financial safety net for us and to give me that best start in life, which she felt couldn't have been achieved within the circumstances of where we were living. And you know, she went on to become a head teacher of special needs school in London, a number of schools in London. She was a real superstar in the kind of education space, really innovative, or, a real driver of, improvement and advocacy for, particularly unheard voices, marginalized communities. Her school was in Peckham, so she was based in, Southeast London. And to the point where when I did move back home, so, my mum remarried. And I did move back home from living with my grandparents. I lived with them for about 5 years. And she just adopted her kids. So we would we would regularly have children in our house that were her kids from the schools because she couldn't bear to think that they wouldn't have a bed to sleep in or a place to go. And so, I remember at the time complaining and, moaning about, oh, who have we got today? But they were always my friends, those kids that didn't have anywhere to go, that had an even harder start to life than I did. They were, I just felt that that was something that needed to happen because if we didn't do it, who else was going to do it? And so I think those are the kinds of lessons that really taught me who I wanted to be, not really what. It wasn't really about career, but who and the type of person that I wanted to be, and to not leave people behind. I think that was a really sort of core part to that journey. And actually, my parents, they're both head teachers, and they met. They were both working at schools in Peckham, and they met at their schools were opposite each other in Peckham. And so it was like this big marriage that these two head teachers got together, and they got married in the church that was next door to the school. So, it was a real kind of joining of the community, a very community-based and focused way of thinking about health in its broadest terms. So through education, through looking after people, um, thinking about how we could bring. So my mum was really strong on like bringing voluntary care and charity sector and people together around problems and enabling families who didn't have much to really have experiences that they wouldn't otherwise get in their lives. So organizing, trips for the kids and their families and things like that. So I think it's that giving back, it's that service element, serving others that has really drawn me to the career that I'm currently in.
I can hear it. Do you get what I mean? I can hear that. It's like you have definitely been heavily influenced by your mother in terms of the marginalized community, fairness, equity. Do you know what I mean? Those are sort of like permeating through your DNA and through the work that you're doing. Because I was
Yeah.
doing a little bit of research, and like keywords, like keywords, a special interest in researching health equity and the impact of social determinants of health. You've won awards like Digital Health Innovator for the Caribbean African Health Network. You are a superwoman yourself, Dr. MaryAnn. Do you get what I mean? Like, and thank God for your mother and your father to show you and to influence you in that way because you are, as you said here, you are a positive disruptor. So I want to hear about the early beginnings. I know about your childhood and how you were influenced by your mother, especially, because she was working with marginalized communities within education, and your mum and dad were both head teachers. Like that, that is a love story that needs to be documented and aired for people to hear about, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they've been married 30 years, so yeah, they're very happy. I think what that gave me were kind of the foundational blocks, I think, for how I wanted to be and the start of that journey, and gave me that grounding and what was it really important. I remember, a few years ago, someone said to me, I don't even remember this happening, but they said to me, oh, when we were children, you stuck up for my brother. He was much older than you and he was being bullied. And you had a massive go at these bullies because, you thought what was happening was really unfair. And I couldn't even remember that. But I think it was so baked in that I needed to stand up for, someone that was, an unjust thing was happening to them, that became sort of really an influential part of my journey. I was really lucky. So through everything that my mum did, that enabled her to save enough money, as well as for me to get a bursary to a private school. So she really focused on my education and wanting that. to be the best that it could be, for me to have the most opportunities that I could have. And so essentially, all of everything she earned went into my education. Um, I was lucky enough, as I said, to get a bursary to a private school, and I lived this really strange life of two lives. One, which was my home reality, where we didn't have a lot, and then in this other world of immense privilege and wealth, where again, I didn't feel like I kind of fitted into either. And then added on top of that, my ethnicity. Also didn't feel like I fit into the black culture or into the white culture. So I kind of constantly lived with this dichotomy of never quite fitting in, but I refused to let it stop me from doing what I wanted to do. So I was like fiercely independent. I think being an only child and spending a lot of time on your own, it can kind of really make you into this incredibly independent person, self-reliant, self-motivating. And, as well as my mum always being a cheerleader to sort of say, yeah, you can do anything, go for it. And so, I did pretty well in my GCSEs. I did pretty good at school. I did lots of sports. I was heavily into kind of this sports, and then had a career conversation after GCSEs. And I just remember it to this day because it was just such a powerful motivator. And the careers teacher said to me, "What do you think you might want to do for your career?" And I said, "I don't know. I really like science, maybe biomedical science, maybe pharmacy. I don't know, maybe medicine." And he just looked at me and said, "Someone like you will never get into medical school." And I just remember it being silent, and I just walked out. And as I was walking out, the fire built inside of me, and I just went, "I'll show you." And that was it. Like, I probably wouldn't have even gone to medical school, but I was so determined to prove this older white man wrong, that someone who was like me, could achieve that dream. And yeah, I just worked really, really, really hard. And it was challenging for me. So I didn't realize I actually have dyslexia. So I didn't know until I was, well into my adult life. And so it was even harder for me to then actually do the studying. But I met this amazing girl at school. Her name was Juliet, and she just spent hours with me teaching me how to sort of study and how to construct my notes and all sorts of things. So, you know, that she believed enough in me to put that effort in when she had her own stuff to do. And then we were like 15, I couldn't believe it. She was phenomenal. And that's what got me through. It was kind of that determination as well as that mentorship enabled me to achieve that dream and, to get the grades and to go to medical school. And, the first person in my family really to go to university. So, again, just a really kind of proud moment. And, I remember my mom saying to me at graduation, "Wow, look at you, you did it." And she said something about, it could have been so different, you could have ended up in prison, And I remember at the time going, "What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous." But when we started, that was the reality of life living in a council house in that part of London, immigrant families, gangs, people getting into trouble. That wasn't an unusual scenario for people. And, that kind of didn't dawn on me till years later, really. And I looked back and thought, and I started to research things around health inequalities and understand the challenges of getting out of poverty and that cycle of poverty and the impact that that has on communities.
Woo,
So, yeah.
woo. There's so much there. And you were sort of like taking me back because I also have come from a council estate in Hackney, Haggerston, Dalston, and, one parent family, even though I saw my dad every other week, only child as well. And so I sort of like get a lot about what you're saying. I really, when you were talking about that fire in your belly, proving them wrong, and I'm thinking about you called yourself a positive disruptor. So what does that really mean in practice?
Well, I mean, I probably just started off as a disruptor and upset quite a few people along the way. So I think that when I say positive disruptor, I really feel like it's something that I have learnt along the way. There are skills that I've developed in terms of being able to influence and how to change hearts and minds. And I think you can just go in like a bull in a china shop and knock everything down. But I've also seen how that can sometimes build resentment and people don't like you. And I'm not there to be liked, I'm there to be respected. But I do think if my goal and my outcome is change, I need to understand that people react and need different communication to enable that change. And so it's not a one size fits all. I might need to modify how I communicate to people about why they should change and encourage that behavior change and also lead with that as well. And so when I talk about kind of positive disruptor, it's a more strategic way of doing that disruption. So not just to be an activist and to shake the tree, but to do it in a way where people don't feel forced. They want to come to the table and make the changes with you. And I'm happy to be flexible. We don't have to do it my way. We can do it their way. Again, for me, it's the outcome. What is it we're trying to achieve? Can we all agree on getting there? Well, then let's just get there.
Mm.
I don't care about how, I care about the achievement and the impact. So I guess that's kind of what it means for me. And it's not something I was naturally good at. I'd say I was definitely the person that I've always been quite unafraid to speak up, even when I probably in hindsight shouldn't have. Um, but it's almost like a feeling I get when, I can be in a setting and someone's behaving really badly. I can't just sit there. Like I feel physically sick sitting there and I go, I've just got to say something and it won't relieve that pressure until I've said something and I'll just get up and go, you really can't speak like that to people, and I'll have to say something. So I know that that's kind of I'm very lucky. That not everybody has that. A lot of people find confrontation really difficult, but I've just had to kind of learn how to fine tune that in a way that can be a much more positive experience for everybody.
Mm. I hear that. I was having a conversation with a friend, and she was saying to me that how um, if she sees her friend going through things or that doesn't really sit right with her, she'll be the one to say something. And I suppose that's quite similar. You don't want to, she can't remain silent about it. She has to definitely say something to that friend to say, listen, right? Are you
Yeah,
sure about this type
absolutely.
of thing? So it's lovely that to have those type of qualities and everything. And what I also feel about is that people will see, you having the titles and having the awards and the achievements, but people don't really get to see the struggle. So what is a setback that really taught you the most about who you are?
Oh, there's so many setbacks. I mean,
So many.
honestly, there's so many. I mean, for
Wow.
women and particularly women of color, you know, there's an armful of setbacks that happen all the time. So particularly in medicine, at the time when I joined, there were more women coming through, but there were very few sort of consultants that were women or women in positions of power. I'd say now, even now in England, all of the top kind of medical roles are all white men. Boardrooms that I've sat in over the last 10 years, I've often been the only woman or the only person of color. So I think there are lots of setbacks. And I think that that's partly why, and it's not just me, lots of people do this. You collect, achievements, okay? You collect qualifications because the reality that we have is you do have to be 10 times better. And I talk about this with my mentees. I wish it wasn't so. I wish this wasn't the world that we live in, where you need to have 10 additional qualifications to go for the same job that a white male only needs one qualification. But that's not the world we live in. So I guess what I've done is understand that reality and know that I still want to achieve, I still want to make change happen, but I want to make it happen so that it's not like this for everybody else that comes after me. So I'm fully cognizant that this is what it's like now, but it doesn't mean that has to be our future. And I think that that's something that I feel really passionately about. But I think the realities are there that it's very hard for people of color to be in leadership roles. Um, I've had openly misogynistic and racist jokes said to me. I've been propositioned by CEOs, it's asked where my husband is and making a decision. I'm just, really outrageous things that shouldn't happen, but they do. And sometimes it has been really hard. I've just told you my innate self is I have to say something, I have to call it out. And I've been sat in a situation where I was in a brand new job. I'd just become a medical director, really prestigious. I was 34 years old, woman of color in a medical director job. The entire top floor of the sort of exec offices, there wasn't anybody else of color. Okay. All these people up there, only person of color. Went in the first week, sat down with the finance director and the chief exec. And there's another very senior leader from outside of our organization comes in, we start having a conversation, and he starts telling a joke. And it's extremely racist and about women. And I'm sat there just looking, to the CEO, to the CFO, going, is someone gonna say something? And he finishes this joke and starts laughing to himself because it's so funny. And the other two are just silent. And I just sat there and I didn't say anything. And I went away and felt like that was the most shameful thing I'd ever done. I took the blame for that situation because I didn't say anything. And I felt so disempowered that I didn't say something that I knew was really wrong. And I just let that happen. And it took me some years after to realize I wasn't to blame, that the two people next to me who had the power, white males, you know, could have at any point shut that down and said something and been an ally, and they didn't. Um, but it stayed with me for a really long time. Like when do you say something and when can't you? If your job's in jeopardy, I've literally just started a job, you know, you've kind of broken this enormous glass ceiling, and what, you just destroy it within the first week. I mean, it's really difficult to kind of navigate some of those situations. And I think that's why I do so much mentoring now, is to try to pass on some of that experience and learning that I've had, in ways that I think might be helpful to people who are kind of entering leadership so that they have an idea of kind of how to handle some of those difficult situations. And like now I know what I would have done, I would have, I know that I would have had a conversation with my chief exec afterwards and said, come on, that wasn't very, and called it out. And I know how to have approached it. But at the time, you feel so vulnerable and disempowered that it can be really challenging. And I think even more now, I mean, that was back in, 2000, 13, 14. It's completely different now. I'd say it's worse now, sometimes in some ways, in terms of just how divisive that conversation has gotten. But we shouldn't walk away from it and we shouldn't be silent. So really for me, it's been around what are some of the ways in which I can approach that conversation to let people know it's not respectful, it's completely out of order and racist and misogynistic, and calling it out for what it is in a way that ensures the safety of other people within the room. So, I think it's a learning journey, isn't it, on how to kind of deal with it and manage it. And I very much believe in being being challenging and doing it through constructive challenge and curiosity rather than just canceling people.
Mhm.
Don't believe in that cancel culture because I do think everybody should be given an opportunity to learn and to change the way in which they behave and
Mm.
given some grace to do that. And I'm here to educate people.
Wow. Because I was thinking about when you were sharing about the colleague who made that racist and sexist joke. What would I have done in that situation? And I most probably wouldn't have said anything, thinking about it, because I am trying to protect my role, my job, my salary, the things, the expense that I have on a monthly basis. I'm trying to protect that. So I'm thinking to myself, I most probably would have preferred to be embarrassed than to say anything. Do you get what I mean? Just it's crazy that we have, I'm going to say, had that type of mindset. So how do you, what advice would you give to somebody who's entering, you know, entering into leadership, you know? What advice would you say to them if they came across that type of situation?
So I think that there's a lived reality in that in some workplaces that type of behavior is every day. Let's be honest, there's some really toxic work environments out there where this is some people's lived reality every day. And how do you call it out every day? It's exhausting, absolutely exhausting. The burnout from doing work in ED&I is huge. I mean, I talk to people all the time who feel one step forward, two steps back. I've done this and it's all, it hasn't, just no one, it's really hard to get that kind of long-term commitment from senior leaders. It's really hard if they feel that they haven't got skin in the game, you know, and and to convince people that this isn't a project. We're not here to do a 12-month project on EDI, you know. This is about completely changing our institutions and systems to be more equitable. And it's not going to be done in my lifetime. I mean, I've got this fantastic friend, Sylvia Stevenson. She's a EDI powerhouse. And I love how she talks about it like a relay race. So, what lap is your lap? Which one are you going to do and then hand off the baton? And I love that analogy because then can really feel like the work that I'm going to do will have energy and impact. And it also can be handed off to somebody else who can then continue that journey. And that really helps for me to not be burnt out and to, because I think the hardest part is the burnout, if I'm going to be honest. It is that constant barrage of things, discriminatory and biased behavior. And what can happen, which is so dangerous, is you can become desensitized. So I used to work in A&E, and I'd say at least 3 to 4 times a shift, someone would say, go back to your country, or they would say, I don't want to see you, I want to see the English doctor. Um, I don't want to see the brown doctor. All the time. And I used to laugh and joke about it. I used to go, oh, yeah, well, there's only brown on today. So that's who your doctor is. And I would laugh it off. And that's when I realized I'd just become so desensitized um, that this was the norm. And if you didn't laugh it off, you were seen as the problem in that environment. Other people saw you as, oh, well, they didn't mean it. Oh, they're a patient, they're in pain. No, they're racist. And other people were not allies in that situation and standing up for me. So I've been there. I know what it's like. I understand how people experience it. And I guess that what I try to support people with are two things. One is how they can protect themselves. So I do think we talk about resilience a lot, but what does that actually look like and how does somebody develop that? And then how they can manage some of those situations. So I do some role playing and things like that. So kind of simulate that tense environment. And what would you say? And how would that come across? And how do you think you could approach that? That might be better. So that people don't feel what I felt in that moment, which was incredible shame and embarrassment, and I was humiliated. I don't want people to ever feel like that. To give them the tools so they actually feel empowered in those situations, but can do it in a way that's respectful and professional and doesn't impact on their career. And then the other part I do is at the top end of the table, which is the systems infrastructure fundamentally have to change. We have these systems that have been built by men, white men, for white men, and they don't work for everybody. And that's what we need to change at the top and getting the leadership to understand their role in that and feel accountable for those actions and their behaviors and setting the strategic direction and the culture that people have to work in. And that environment is something that I spend a lot of time on as well. I think is really important for that kind of longer term impact that we're looking for.
Mm. It's so interesting because when you're talking about the impact that you want in terms of legacy, I feel that is so key. I think now that I am 50 plus now, I'm proud to say, more than ever am I thinking about legacy. So in terms of, you say digital innovation in healthcare, um, what is the personal or human story that fuels your passion within this industry?
Yeah, so I think I've always been quite creative. I've always had lots of ideas. Quite impulsive. I can be quite impulsive. Lots of ideas, creative, and yeah, in kind of the medical world, it's very structured, it's very hierarchical, and some of that, there's some of those elements within me kind of got suppressed. And then whilst I was, doing a lot, entered into medical leadership, I actually started doing like a clinical redesign program. So I'd done my research and it had been around the social determinants of health. So understanding what are all those components that sit outside of clinical care that impact on someone's health and might mean that they choose to go to hospital, and then might mean that we as a hospital have to admit them into hospital, because it's not always about their medical condition. It actually could be housing related, their carers, um, their history of drinking or smoking, things like that. So really understanding the impact of those things that we often kind of don't associate with health, but actually form 80% of what makes somebody healthy or not. So that led me into this kind of redesign program. I learned some skills around kind of project management and how to do change and things like that, and was able to really spark that innovative curiosity that sits within me to say, I want to make a change. And then it gave me the skills to do it. So, and this is how you do it. And to see the results of that happen. So, had a really successful change program for the, really marginalized patients that were very intensive and kind of high users of hospital care. And that program was spread to 17 other hospitals across Australia and New Zealand. So it was, really successful. I was really proud of it. And it still continues to this day. So it's something that clearly has kind of longevity within, the healthcare space. And then came over back to the UK and again, just kind of thought, what more can I do in this space? And really just quite serendipitously saw a job in health innovation. I thought, that looks interesting. Yeah, I'll give that a go. And didn't really know what the job kind of entailed. But as soon as I got into the role, I knew that I had something to give that was different to what had previously been there. And I think it comes with that population health lens of understanding the health inequalities that exist within our communities, and then thinking about how we can address that within innovation. And what I was starting to understand was that within things like digital, and redesigning new care pathways, those communities were forgotten about. They weren't even thought about. So, I spoke to a Pakistani woman who was talking to me, I was talking to her about breast cancer and breast cancer screening. And I'd already looked at the data and I'd gone, your community don't really go to breast cancer screening. Like the rates are really poor. How can we improve that? And she said to me, but our community don't get breast cancer. I said, what? And she said, well, look at all the leaflets and posters. They're all of older white women. They get breast cancer. We don't get breast cancer. And in that moment, I just knew what we were doing wrong. It's so obvious, but I needed that kind of hit in the face of this is what we're doing to our communities. This is why those health inequalities exist, because we haven't even thought about what we're putting out there. We haven't even thought about those communities when we design or develop anything new. And I was really determined to ensure that, particularly digital and AI, that our community is not left behind. We already know these biases exist in the system, and what we think they're going to just disappear. Of course not. The people who are designing and developing everything relating to digital and AI are from, guess what, kind of the white male perspective. So everything they build will be through that lens. And we have to change that. And so I guess that coming back to kind of what you talk about in purpose and legacy, it's not the role that's important to me, it's the work. What is the work that we're going to do to change, influence, redesign what it currently looks like? Because at the moment it's not working. And that's for lots of different reasons. Like I truly believe people come to work to do the best that they can do. I believe, I have a very strong belief 99% of people are good people, but we're all fallible. We can all make mistakes. And so I think, I'm here to hold the mirror up to say, this is where we're going wrong. And have you thought about doing it differently? And just sparking that question in somebody's brain, um, to move that change forward.
I love that. I so love that, Dr. Marian. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at you and I'm saying, I want to learn from you. I want to glean from you, type of thing. And I'm saying to myself, your ride throughout leadership and throughout the medical field has been absolutely amazing and very inspiring for me, looking at your CV, and the things that you have accomplished and achieved and the impact that you want to leave as a lasting legacy. What are your personal habits? What are the things that you do to get through? I want to know. I want to learn from you. What are the things that you do?
What are the things that I do? So, um, it's funny because as I said to you, like I have dyslexia, but I read a lot. So again, it's one of those things where I'm kind of like, this will not get me, and it was a big deal for me that at 40, I decided to go back to university. So I went back and I enrolled in a doctorate of public health and policy, with the London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. And it was one of the few times where I never needed the qualification, but I just felt like, I really wanted to learn about how to address health inequalities properly. So not just what I think should happen, but really understand the evidence and to delve into that in a much deeper way than what I was currently doing. And then B, to prove a point to myself that anyone could achieve academic excellence. There's clearly something in me that teacher really continued to set that fire. And I'm still fighting with my younger self, who's going, you'll show them, you'll show them. And I know I don't need to show them anymore. I'm clearly, I've accomplished enough. But I also love learning. So that's kind of C. I do love learning. I love the process of learning. I love the achievement of, you know, getting to the end point of something and feeling competent around a particular subject matter, particularly one that I feel passionate about. And so yeah, I've kind of embarked on that journey and I read a lot. I read a lot. I actually don't just read kind of medical things. I love sci-fi, I love fiction books. I just find that reading, particularly in childhood when I didn't read books because it was too difficult and I had not very nice teachers who would say I was a terrible reader and, you know, um, shouldn't read in front of the class because I was so bad. I didn't have very nice things said to me to encourage me for reading, which was surprising when I've got two parents that are teachers, but I just didn't enjoy books, that I found it too hard. But now I really enjoy it. So that's something that I feel really helps in this job, actually, is just staying up to date, reading and reading around topics and having curiosity and interest in other things. Um, and then I'd say a lot of the other things to do with leadership, if I'm going to be honest, two things. One is people, understanding and liking people. Like, it sounds so simple, but don't go and be a leader if you don't like people. Because ultimately you need people to follow you. So, I try to do as much face-to-face engagement. Like I really enjoy making new relationships. I like meeting people. I like really meeting broad sets of people. So I make sure I engage with real diversity across the board. I think we can live in quite a privileged bubble. When you get to a certain level, I think you can end up in a bit of an echo chamber. And I like to make sure I'm always hearing from quite different views. I might not agree with those views, but I want to hear from them. And I want to make sure that they're also included. And just things like, I don't do clinical practice anymore, but the things I do talk about a lot are equity of access for healthcare. So, I'll try to take public transport and get the bus. Sounds really simple. I mean, I used to do it all the time in London. You lived in London, you got in South London, you got the bus everywhere, right? But then you kind of hit your sort of 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you drive everywhere. And, now I get the bus again and realize how hard it is. And, I've got kids and I'm seeing people with their prams and trying to get on the bus and people in a wheelchair and the elderly and how they get transport and things like that. And again, it just keeps you kind of grounded in what matters to people, what are their needs, and how could we as leaders try to support that, support changes that improve the lives of everyday people? And then the third thing that I do is all about my own personal well-being. So it is just how do I keep sane in this crazy world of leadership and politics and difficult personalities and toxic environments. And, I'd say my faith is really important to me. So I'm actually a Buddhist, and I have been since my early 20s. It kind of really saved my life, I think, very grounding and really thinking about how I can be more compassionate. That's why I talk about kindness, because it doesn't cost you anything, but, it can just bring you so much value and wealth into your life. So, I've tried to take time to kind of be in nature. I love the countryside. I love being by the sea. I lived in near the sea in Australia for 13 years and just, I love walking my dogs and I spend time with my children's and I don't work on the weekend. You know, Friday night turns off and I'm there. I need to be present with my family. And that keeps me grounded. And I think that, and having, hobbies and things that you enjoy doing. As I said, I'm very creative. I like doing like art type activities. So finding things that you enjoy, and ultimately, I think for me, it's just being grateful for everything that I have. I have everything I've ever wanted. Like I'm exceptionally grateful for everything and feel so blessed and privileged to be doing what I'm doing and that I love doing and that I feel is leaving some impact, for things that I think are really important for the community that I live in, um, and for people, more broadly. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just like finding the joy and purpose in life it's one of those, you mentioned about age before. It is something that comes with age. I think that in your 20s and 30s, I mean, 20s, I was just partying. The, let's just be
I
honest,
was out there. I'm telling you, I was
right?
out there. I'm in college,
Wow.
rave, college,
Yeah,
work, part-time Saturday job.
out and about, living my best life. You know, early 30s, I'm raising kids. I can't even remember those years because it was crazy. And I just remember thinking, I've got to survive. I've got to survive. If I can work in A&E on a Friday and Saturday night, I can get through two children at home. It was they were full on. Mate, we've got two boys, 17 months apart. They were full on. And then I think you sort of come into your 40s, and that's when you start to, be more reflective and kind of go, what am I doing? Like, why am I really here? What is it that I want to leave behind? And actually, I've been incredibly lucky in that all the things that I've done have kind of inadvertently landed me in the right place, but I didn't plan it. Um, but I have come here with all of the right things in place, like the right skills, the right experience. And, so that's probably why I feel so blessed that it's happened in that way. I think there are times when you can be more prescriptive and more strategic in terms of your priorities. Um, I knew that I wanted to have a family. So, I prioritized it in my life. I said, I'm not going to, you know, go full throttle into a career pathway. I know I want to have kids right now. And that was really, really important to me. And so I did it. But you can't have everything at once. It's too much. And that's probably the biggest lesson I pass down to people, to women in particular, younger women who are looking to, achieve their career aspirations or go into leadership, is you can't have everything all at once. You can have everything in the whole pathway of your life, in the whole journey of your life, but not all at once. It's not possible. And in fact, that's when you'll crash and burn, is if you try to do it all at once. And I hope that those are the kinds of lessons that people find helpful.
That's lovely because it's like you saw my last question. It's like you saw my last question, but when you're talking about how, it's difficult for women to have it all, I believe that. Do you get what I mean? We can't have it all at once, but along the journey and the path, if we,
Absolutely.
some things don't happen within the plan. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you gotta, be flexible and stuff.
Yeah.
But along the way, you can have the things that you desire. And with planning sometimes, and sometimes not planning, things will happen how
And
it's
and I
supposed to
kind
be.
yeah, and I think what I find really interesting is a lot of people go, "Oh, I've got this career plan." And I'm going, Okay, it should probably be a life plan." The career isn't all of you. What makes you are lots of different parts, and you need to bring all of those to the table. What if you want to put a plan together, not just this kind of one element around your career, although it is an important sense of self. And I do think that's important, but particularly for women, I do think it is having a much more holistic view on what that plan is and a much longer time frame in which to achieve it. And I think that when people do that, you get much more satisfaction in achieving those goals than kind of going, oh, well, this was my 5-year plan. I haven't achieved this, like one job title or whatever. I think looking at it much broadly, because I think that, when we're all on our deathbed, we're not going to be going, oh, I wish I'd been in the office more. We're just not. We're going to be going, talking about our kids. We're going to be, talking about our family, the friends that we've made along the way, the experiences of living in different countries or something. We're going to be talking about that, and work will be this big,
Yeah.
you
It'd
know.
be not even thought of. Not even thought of, it's
Exactly. So,
true.
I think almost kind of reverse engineer it and then think about, as I said, that life plan and what it is that you think you want to achieve, and aim for small goals. Like I think that it's definitely achieving small goals keeps you motivated and energized. So set one thing out. I don't know, this week, this month. By the end of the year, what's the one thing that I really would have liked to have achieved? And I think that that's a much more manageable way to kind of take those steps towards that, that those life goals that you really want to achieve.
I'm going back a bit when you mentioned about Buddhism. And I was going through a breakup, and there was a book that was circulating online, and it is called by Pema Chödrön, When All Things Fall Apart. Oh my goodness. I just oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
That book is absolutely beautiful, Ritlin.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
so. I mean, I was in a similar situation, when I was in my sort of early 20s, and again, someone gave me a book, and that kind of started my journey. And I think that some things just come to you at the right time. And that's why I say it saved my life. And it wasn't that I'm not, it wasn't in the sense of, I was suicidal and didn't want to be here. It was in the sense of I was very lost and I didn't know where I was going. I had no idea really about myself, but I knew I was intensely dissatisfied and a bit apathetic about life. Like a bit, I don't know I don't know what I'm doing. And that really gave me time to reflect on myself and to use it as a way to start kind of on that journey around who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it, and how I wanted to live my life, and live it with a positive energy and with compassion and thinking about how, we can particularly around alleviating suffering in other people. I think that's something that's always kind of been in there. And it sort of gave an outlet. And I think any kind of faith or spirituality that people have, it becomes more important as you get older. I think, as I said, when you're younger, it's, I don't know. But I think as you get older, again, it's probably that, we're kind of hit the mid-years and going, how long are we going to be here for? And it does become really important. Um, and, I do think it's something that you've got to make time for. It won't just be there. You have to find time to be in that kind of other space with yourself.
That's true.
And make time for it. And I think that we live in a world that's very busy, feels very busy. I mean, I'm not really on social media. I have LinkedIn page, but I don't have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, nothing. So I occasionally go on Pinterest. I like to look at nice houses, but I'm just not really online. And again, that I think that's a really helpful thing. I think that there's too much that happens online, and I genuinely don't think it's good for people's mental health. My eldest son didn't get a phone until he was 14.
That's good going,
And they're not,
14.
yeah, and they're not allowed social media. They don't
Mm,
have any social media pages.
mm.
So I just think it's really bad for people's mental health. I get this is society now, but I think we have to kind of understand what the impact might be for you. And some people I'm sure are fine with it, but other people it really affects them. So, I think, if at any point you can say you can go on holiday and just switch off and completely turn off your phone, turn off your emails, turn off your social media. I think that kind of rest and recuperation is really important for people to
Mhm.
maintain their kind of long-term well-being.
Yeah, I love going away. I make sure I go away every year, and I just switch off. I'm
Absolutely.
I'm a total different person. It's very easy for me to switch off, especially when I'm out of England. And I really look forward to those moments. We're going to go back again. Um, Is there a link, do you think, between, you were saying about when you was in your 20s, about who you were, and you had you was quite apathetic with regards to your life and what is it that you wanted to do, if I'm correct?
Hmm.
Is there a link between that and you saying that you wasn't sure as to where you fitted in within the black community or the white community? Is there a link there?
I think it was, if I'm going to be honest, I think it was probably just everything. I
Everything.
think that, so I came out of medical school. And you go, yeah, yeah, I've achieved this. And then you start working and they really, I mean, back then they really worked you. I mean, it was like 100-hour week, 120-hour weeks. It was really hard work and, often doing things you didn't really want to do. Like but then you're also in a quite competitive environment as well. So medicine naturally is quite competitive. You're expected to kind of choose your specialty really early on. And yeah, there are some people who, from the age of 5, always knew they wanted to be a surgeon. But I wasn't one of those people because I just told you I didn't even know I wanted to be a doctor until someone told me I couldn't be a doctor. So I was kind of there going, I've just got to get to the end point of medical school. Okay. Now I've just got to get to the end of intern year. Now, and I was just very short term thinking. And then it came to, well, now you need to choose what kind of doctor you're going to be, Marianne. And I went, I don't know. I don't, I don't know. I didn't even know who I was, yet alone having to choose this kind of specialty that essentially is your persona for the rest of your life. Like it is a really big deal. And that's why, again, I sort of said that Buddhism, that faith part really sort of saved me because it really gave me, I went to France. So I ended up taking some time at the final year of medical school to go to France for, it's called Erasmus. So you like spend a semester in another country. Um, had an amazing time there, read all these books around Buddhism, met my husband, well, my soon-to-be husband, and you know, and then within that sort of 18-month to 2-year time period, really kind of worked on myself and started to really realize some of my drivers, like why I did things and what was important to me, and starting to curate what I wanted my life to be and the direction I was going in. So when it came to that conversation of, well, what specialist do you want to be? Because you're going to have to go into training now and you're going to be in it for the next 10 years. And by the way, that will be your job for the rest of your life. I actually was really brave and said, no, I'm not going to be put in a box. I know this isn't right for me, and I need to take some time away from this system that I'm being pushed into, and I don't want to be pushed into it. And I think if I hadn't done some of that work 2 years before, I would have just gone along with it. I would have just gone along with, I'd have just picked something random, to be honest. I would have just gone, oh, I'll just be a whatever. And I would have just gone along with it. But I didn't. Rejected what everybody else was doing, which meant that at the time it was really frowned upon. It wasn't, I had people saying to me, "Oh dear, you're going to get in trouble." La, la, la. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a really big deal. It was, people that were my supervisors were saying, "Oh, it's not a good idea." And I said, "Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I'm going to Australia." And so my husband and I got married then that summer and we moved to Australia. And I said, I'm going to go to Australia. I'm going to do a year working in a hospital there and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out what I think I'm going to do with my career. I don't know yet, but I need time. And so took that kind of brave decision to go to the other side of the world. And then after a year, my husband was like, so are we going back then? And I said, no, I really like it here. I really like it here. I think this is where we're supposed to be. It just felt right. I can't say, I can't give you any details as to why. It just felt like the right place for us to be. And so we ended up staying there. All 3 of my children were born there. Yeah, we lived there for 13 years and we only came back in 2021. Yeah, so, it was. I look at that as a really important part of my life because actually the Australian system enabled me to take as much time as I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. There were no constraints. And in fact, there were only supportive people who said, yeah, you want to go and try that specialty? Yeah, sure, we'll get you a job there. And then I went the next year, oh, I think I might want to do psychiatry. Yeah, we can get you a job there. Oh, I think I might want to go into A&E. Yeah, we can get you a job there. And it just having that, really, there are good things and bad things about Australia, but this particular part, which was around how the medical program was structured really gave me the flexibility I needed to find out what I wanted to do, and where I wanted to go in my career. And met some incredible mentors along the way that really helped me on that journey. So I just know that that was the right decision. Anyone that's kind of thinking about doing something a bit off the wall, I guess I'd say trust your gut. You're
Mm.
probably right. Don't sleepwalk into, a situation where, again, you're just being apathetic. You're just kind of going with it. If it doesn't feel right, listen to your gut, question it, ask why, and be brave and courageous to go out on a limb and do something different.
Mm. I love that because we are the drivers of our career, of our lives, isn't it? We shouldn't just wait for things to happen. We should be the ones who are making things happen.
Absolutely.
So, as we're wrapping up, oh, you said so much wonderful nuggets along the way. I can't wait to edit this and create clips out of it, Dr. MaryAnn. What do you believe? Oh, what is this last bit I want to ask you? It's about what you'd like our watchers and listeners to remember about your long story short.
What do I want them to remember? Anyone can do it. I'm not special at all. I'm very average. I'm a very average person. But I think that if you're determined, if you want it, and you're prepared to put the energy, time, effort, I do think anyone can achieve their dreams. I'm not saying it's easy. It's really hard. There've been some, there've been times I've completely doubted myself and gone, I can't do this. I can't. But underneath it, again, it's that motivating fire of I can do it. Why does it have to be that other person that achieves all these things? Why can't I be the person that gets there? And I see this in many of the people I coach and mentor. Actually, the determinating factor for success is motivation. If you're motivated, really motivated, and you want it, you're going to get it. You're absolutely going to get it. And it's so, you can feel it, it's palpable. When someone is motivated, they're high energy, they're positive. You want to be around that person. So if you want to be around them, you feel like anything's possible. You kind of think, yeah, well, I'll give them a go. I'll give them that job. So there's something about it's not really the qualifications and the accolades and well, I did these courses and I had this previous job. It really is as simple, I think, as being highly motivated. And then the second one is always willing to learn. Having that really like learning mindset and being open to kind of new experiences. And I've stepped into every leadership role and kind of gone, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Really?
Yeah, of course. I don't believe in imposter syndrome, by the way. I do
Okay.
not believe that we should pathologize something that is a human behavior, which is self-doubt. I think that
Mm.
we should stop pathologizing it. Self-doubt and anxiety are absolutely normal behaviors,
I get
right?
it
But
all
it's
the time.
how,
So,
yeah, but it's how we manage it.
yeah.
Okay. So if I have self-doubt and I'm going, oh my God, what am I doing here? My next thought is, how am I going to be the best at what I need to do? And then what am I going to do to ensure that I feel really confident in this space and being able to do it? And learning from those mistakes and being honest with when I make those mistakes and owning them and going, okay, mea culpa, I didn't get that right.
It's
But
true.
you know what? I'm going to get it right next time. I'm going to be sure that, next time I'm really on point. And having that kind of continuous improvement mindset. Um, and I think it is infectious. I think there's something about people with good energy. Other people want to be around them, and they want to interact with them. And, you know, that's how I think you can build really successful teams, putting out that type of energy, bringing other people in, and then working together towards kind of a common goal and purpose. So, yeah, I hope people go away and think anything's possible. And also, I think there's some practical things, get a mentor, get someone you trust, trusted in a circle. I have some amazing peers. So although I sort of said like I don't really fit in either the black or the white community, actually more recently I have this most amazing peer group that are black women executives that have been incredibly supportive and really understanding of that journey and having that kind of group shared experience of how hard it is. That's what I said, that reality isn't changing quickly. This is it, but I do think we can find a lot of not just comfort, also ideas on like how to manage things in the day to day. That is really helpful from those peer groups. So believe everything is possible, be really motivated, find a mentor, and get into a peer group. Those are the things I think people should go away with.
I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. MaryAnn Ferreux. Have I pronounced your surname
Yeah.
correctly? Yay!
It's, by the way, it's fine. It's not my name. It's my husband's. So
Oh, is
okay.
it?
It's not my name. So I don't care.
I want to thank you so much for spending the time and sharing so many nuggets of information, and sharing your early beginnings and lessons learned. I am sat here and I'm just gleaning. I just cannot wait to go through this the video and just to hear again all the wonderful nuggets and information that you shared. And thank you again for sitting on my virtual couch, long story short podcast. Thank you so much.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.